Hey guys, this is Chapter 2, Basics. There are 48 questions in this chapter, and I will be reading them all for you. Question number 1. A lithium-ion battery should never be short-circuited. Number 2. How much voltage does a standard automobile battery usually supply? 12 volts. Number 3. Which of the following is a source of EMF? Lithium-ion battery. Number 4. A cell that can be repeatedly recharged by supplying it with electrical energy is known as a storage cell. Number 5. An alkaline cell that has nominal value of 1.5 volts. When supplying a great deal of current, the voltage may drop to 1.2 volt. This is due to the cell's internal resistance. Number 6. Which component has a positive and negative side? A battery. Number 7. The most common primary cell in use today is the carbon zinc or flashlight cell. This can be recharged. Never. Number 8. To increase the voltage output, several cells are connected in series. Number 9. An important difference between a conventional flashlight battery and a lead-acid battery is that only the lead-acid battery can be repeatedly recharged. 10. To increase the current capacity of a cell, several cells should be connected in parallel. 11. What are the possible values of a 100 ohm resistor with a 10% tolerance? 90 to 110 ohms. 12. A club project requires that a resistive voltage divider provide a very accurate and predictable ratio. Out of the list below, which resistor tolerance would you select? 0.1%. 13. A gold band on a resistor indicates the tolerance is 5%. 14. What do the first three color bands on a resistor indicate? The value of the resistor in ohms. 15. What does the fourth color band on a resistor mean? The resistance tolerance in percentage. 16. How do you find a resistor's tolerance rating? By reading the resistor's color code. 17. If a voltmeter marked in volts is used to measure a 3,500 millivolt potential, what reading would it show? 3.5 volts. 18. A resistor with a color code brown, black, and red would have the value of 1,000 ohms. 19. How do you find a resistor's value? By using the resistor's color code. 20. If a carbon resistor's temperature is increased, what will happen to the resistance? It will change depending on the resistor's temperature coefficient rating. 21. The reciprocal of resistance is conductance. 22. Name 3 good electrical conductors. Gold, silver, aluminum. 23. Name 4 good electrical insulators. Gold, glass, air, plastic, porcelain. 24. Why do resistors sometimes get hot when in use? Some electrical energy passing through them is lost as heat. 25. 6.6 kilovolts is equal to 6,600 volts. 26. What is the best conductor among the following materials? Copper. 27. At length of metal 27. A length of metal is connected in a circuit and is found to conduct electricity very well. It would be best described as having a low resistance. 28. A current of 1/4 ampere may be written as 250 milliamperes. 29. The letter R is the symbol for resistance. 30. The material listed will most readily allow an electric current to flow is called a conductor. 31. The most common material used to make a resistor is carbon. 32. What is the word used to describe how fast electrical energy is used? Power. 33. The resistance of a conductor changes with temperature. 34. Which electrical circuit uses too much current? A short circuit. 35. Which electrical circuit will have no current? An open circuit. 36. A resistor in a circuit becomes very hot and starts to burn. This is because the resistor is dissipating too much power. 37. A permanent magnet will most likely be made from steel. 38. A force of repulsion exists between two blank magnetic poles. Like. 39. What does a multimeter measure? Voltage, current, and resistance. 40. The correct instrument to measure plate current or collector current of a transmitter is an ammeter. 41. Potential difference is measured by means of a voltmeter. 42. One Morse code qualification is available for the amateur radio certificate. What Morse code qualification is available for the amateur radio certificate? 5 words per minute. 43. Battery capacity is commonly stated as a value of current delivered over a specified period of time. What is the effect of exceeding that specified current? The battery charge will not last as long. 44. Your mobile HF transceiver draws 22 amperes on a transmit. The manufacturer suggests limiting the voltage drop to 0.5 volts, and the vehicle battery is 3 meters or 10 feet away. Given the losses below at that current, which minimum wire gauge must you use? Number 10. 0.07 volt per meter, or 0.02 volts per foot. 45. You need a current limiting resistor for a light emitting diode, or LED. The actual resistance is not critical at all. Out of the list below, which tolerance would you select? 20%. Number 46. Given that red equals 2, violet equals 7, and yellow equals 4, what is the nominal value of a resistor whose color code reads red, violet, and yellow? 270 kiloohms. 47. If a meter marked in amperes is used to measure a 3000 milliampere current, what reading would it show? 3 amperes. 48. The instrument is used for measuring the flow of electrical current is the ammeter. Hello, and this is Chapter 3, Ohm's Law and Power. There are 44 questions in this chapter. Number 1. Resistor wattage ratings are determined by heat dissipation qualities. Number 2. If you have a handheld transceiver which puts out 500 milliwatts, how many watts would that be? 0.5 watts. Number 3. A kiloohm is 1,000 ohms. Number 4. How many millivolts are equivalent to 2 volts? 2,000. Number 5. Voltage drop means voltage developed across the terminals of a component. Number 6. If a 12-volt battery supplies 0.25 amperes to a circuit, what is the circuit's resistance? 48 ohms. Number 7. How is the voltage in a DC current calculated when the current and the resistor are known? Voltage equals current multiplied by resistance. Number 8. What is the basic unit of electrical power? The watt. Number 9. If you have light bulbs marked 40 watts, 60 watts, and 100 watts, which one will use electrical energy the fastest? 100-watt bulb. Number 10. Which two electrical units multiplied together give the unit watts? Volts and amperes. Number 11. The resistor that could dissipate the most heat would be marked 20 watts. Number 12. If a current of 2 amperes flows through a 50 ohm resistor, what is the voltage across the resistor? 100 volts. Number 13. How is the resistance in a DC circuit calculated when the voltage and current are known? Resistance equals voltage divided by current. Number 14. High-power resistors are usually large with heavy leads. The size aids operation of the resistors by allowing heat to dissipate more readily. Number 15. Which of the following two quantities should be multiplied together to find power? Voltage and current. Number 16. How is the current in a DC circuit calculated when the voltage and resistance is known? Current equals voltage divided by resistance. Number 17. Power is expressed in watts. Number 18. Total resistance of 4 68 ohm resistors wired in parallel is 17 ohms. Number 19. Total resistance in a parallel circuit is always less than the smallest resistance. 20. Two resistors are in parallel. Resistor A carries twice the current of resistor B, which means A has half the resistance of B. 21. The total current in a parallel circuit is equal to the sum of the currents through all the parallel branches. Number 22. Why would a large size resistor be used instead of a smaller one of the same resistance? For greater power dissipation. Number 23. Two resistors are connected in parallel are connected across a 40-volt battery. If each resistor is 1,000 ohms, the total current is 80 milliamperes. Number 24. Which series combination of resistors would replace a single 120 ohm resistor? 524 ohm. Number 25. If a 3-volt battery supplies 30 milliamps to a circuit, the circuit resistance is 10 ohms. 26. A lamp has a resistance of 30 ohms and a 6-volt battery is connected. The current flow would be 0.2 amp. 27. Calculate the value of resistance necessary to drop 100 volts with the current flow of 0.8 milliamps, 125 kiloohms. 28. The total resistance of resistors connected in series is greater than the resistance of any one resistor. 29. 5 10-ohm resistors connected in series equals 50 ohms. 30. In a parallel circuit with a voltage source and several branch resistors, how is the total current related to the current in the branch resistors? It equals the sum of the branch current through each resistor. 31. The voltage required to force a current of 4.4 amps through a resistance of 50 ohms is 220 volts. 32. If 10 resistors of equal value were wired in parallel, the total resistance would be R divided by 10. 33. The resistance of a circuit can be found by using one of the following. R equals E divided by I. 34. What voltage will be needed to supply a current of 200 milliamps to operate an electrical lamp which has a resistance of 25 ohms? 5 volts. 35. When 2 ohm, 1 watt resistors are connected in series, the maximum total power that can be dissipated by the resistors is 2 watts. 36. The DC input power of a transmitter operating at 12 volts and drawing 500 milliamps would be 6 watts. 37. One advantage of replacing a 50 ohm resistor with a parallel combination of two similarly rated 100 ohm resistors is that the parallel combination will have the same resistance but greater power rating. 38. When two 500 ohm 1 watt resistors are connected in parallel, they can dissipate a maximum total power of 2 watts. 39. How many watts of electrical power are used by a 12 volt DC light bulb that draws 0.2 amps? 2.4 watts. 40. A 12 volt light bulb is rated at a power of 30 watts. The current drawn would be 30 over 12 amps. 41. If two 10 ohm resistors are connected in series with a 10 volt battery, the power consumption would be 5 watts. 42. If the voltage applied to two resistors in series is doubled, how much will the total power change? Increase 4 times. 43. Three resistors respectively rated at 10, 15, and 20 ohms respectively are connected in parallel across a 6 volt battery. Which statement is true? The current flowing through the 10 ohm, 15 ohm, and 20 ohm resistance when added together equals the total current drawn from the battery. Number 44. Which combination of resistors would make a 50 ohm dummy load capable of dissipating 5 watts? 4 2 watt 200 ohm resistors in parallel. Welcome back. Chapter 4. Inductors and capacitors. There are 50 questions in this chapter. Number 1. How many microfarads is 1 million picofarads? 1 microfarad. Number 2. An inductance of 10,000 microhenries may be stated correctly as 10 millihenries. Number 3. If two equal value capacitors are connected in parallel, what is their total capacitance? Twice the value of one capacitor. Number 4. If two equal value inductors are connected in series, what is their total inductance? Twice the value of one inductor. Number 5. If two equal value capacitors are connected in series, what is their total capacitance? Half the value of either capacitor. Number 6. If two equal value inductors are connected in parallel, what is their total inductance? Half the value of one inductor. Number 7. What determines the inductance of a coil? The core material, the core diameter, the length of the coil, and the number of turns of wire used to wind around the coil. Number 8. A 100% efficient transformer has a turns ratio of 1 to 5. If the secondary current is 50 milliamps, the primary current is 0.25 amps. Number 9. Which series of combination of capacitors would be best replace a faulty 10 microfarad capacitor? 2 20 microfarad capacitors. Number 10. 10. To replace a faulty 10 millihenry choke, you could use 2 5 millihenry chokes in series. 11. The reactance of capacitors increases as AC frequency decreases. 12. How does a capacitor react to AC? As the frequency applied AC increases, the reactance decreases. 13. If two equal value capacitors are connected in parallel, what is their capacitance? Twice the value of either capacitor. 14. In general, the resistance of inductors increases with increasing AC frequency. 15. The capacitive reactance of a 15. The capacitive reactance of a 25 microfarad capacitor connected to a 60 Hz line is 106.1 ohms. 16. The total capacitance of two or more capacitors in series is always less than the smallest capacitor. 17. If no load is attached to the secondary winding of a transformer, what is the current in the primary winding called? Magnetizing current. 18. Capacitive reactance decreases as frequency increases. Number 19. Inductances. 19. In inductances, AC may be opposed by both resistance of winding wire and reactance due to inductive effect. The term which includes resistance and reactance is impedance. 20. How does a coil react to AC? As the frequency of the applied AC increases, the reactance increases. 21. Inductive reactance may be increased by an increase in the applied frequency. 22. Three 15 microfarad capacitors are wired in series. The total capacitance of this arrangement is 5 microfarads. 23. What determines the capacitance of a capacitor? The material between the plates, the area on one side of the plate, the number of plates, and the spacing between the plates. Number 24. In a mains power transformer, the primary winding has 250 turns, and the secondary has 500. If the input voltage is 110 volts, the likely secondary voltage is 220 volts. Number 25. The voltage induced in a conductor moving in a magnetic field is at a maximum when the movement is perpendicular to the lines of the force. 26. The strength of the magnetic field around a conductor in air is directly proportional to the current in the conductor. 27. A transformer has 240 volt primary that draws a current of 250 milliamps from the main supply. Assuming no losses, what current will be available from a 12 volt secondary? 5 amps. 28. The fact that energy transfer from primary to secondary windings in a power transformer is not perfect is indicated by warm ion laminations. 29. A transformer operates at 6.3 volts 2 amp light bulb from its secondary winding. The power consumed by the primary winding is approximately 13 watts. 30. Maximum induced voltage in a coil occurs when current is going through its greatest rate of change. 31. Resonance is the condition that exists when inductive reactance and competitive reactance are equal. 32. In a series resonance circuit at resonance, the circuit has low impedance. 33. A coil and airspace capacitor are arranged to form a resonant circuit. The resonant frequency will remain the same if we add a resistor to the circuit. 34. When a parallel coil capacitor combination is supplied with AC of different frequencies, there will be one frequency where the impedance will be the highest. This is the resonant frequency. 35. Resonance is an electrical property used to describe the frequency characteristic of a coil and capacitor circuit. 36. A tuned circuit is formed from two basic components. These are inductors and capacitors. 37. Resonance circuits in a receiver are used to select signal frequencies. 38. When a series LCR circuit is tuned to the frequency of the source, the line current reaches maximum. 39. Parallel tuned circuits offer very high impedance at resonance. 40. Resonance is the condition that exists when inductive reactance and capacitive reactance are equal and opposite in sign. 41. In a parallel resonance circuit at resonance, the circuit has high impedance. 42. What property allows a coil wound on a ferrite coil to mitigate or reduce the effects of an offending radio signal? High reactance at radio frequencies. 43. What property allows an RF capacitor to have little effect on an audio signal? High reactance at low frequencies. 44. What property allows an RF choke coil to have little effect on signals meant to pass through the coil? Low reactance at low frequencies. 45. When will a power source deliver maximum output to the load? When the impedance of the load is equal to the impedance of the source. 46. What happens when the impedance of an electrical load is equal to the internal impedance of the power source? The source delivers maximum power to the load. 47. Why is impedance matching important? So the source can deliver maximum power to the load. 48. To obtain efficient power transmission from a transmitter to an antenna requires matching of impedances. 49. To obtain efficient transfer of power from a transmitter to an antenna, it is important that there is a matching of impedance. 50. The reason that an RF transmission line should be matched at the transmitter end is to transfer the maximum amount of power to the antenna. Hi, and welcome back. This is Chapter 5, Waves and Wavelengths. There are 29 questions in this chapter. Number 1. In Canada, the 15-meter amateur band corresponds in frequency to 21.00 to 21.450. Number 2. In Canada, the 160-meter amateur band corresponds in frequency to 1.8 to 2.0 megahertz. Number 3. Which of the following answers is not correct? Based on the following width required, the following modes may be transmitted on these frequencies. Fast scan television, or ATV, on 14.23 megahertz. Number 4. In Canada, the 40-meter amateur band corresponds in frequency to 7.0 to 7.3 megahertz. Number 5. In Canada, the 20-meter amateur band corresponds in frequency to 14.000 to 14.350 megahertz. Number 6. In Canada, the 75 or 80-meter amateur band corresponds in frequency to 3.5 to 4.0 megahertz. Number 7. In Canada, the 10-meter amateur band corresponds to 28.00 to 29.700 megahertz. Number 8. Which of the following answers is not correct? Based on the bandwidth required, the following modes may be transmitted on these frequencies. Fast scan television, or ATV, on 145 megahertz. Number 9. What is a band plan? A guideline for using different operating modes within an amateur band. Number 10. If a dial marked in megahertz shows a reading of 3.525 megahertz, what would it show if it was marked in kilohertz? 3,525 kilohertz. Number 11. 1 megahertz is equal to 1,000 kilohertz. Number 12. A signal is composed of a fundamental frequency of 2 kilohertz and another of 4 kilohertz. This 4 kilohertz signal is referred to as a harmonic of the 2 kilohertz signal. Number 13. If the frequency of the waveform is 100 hertz, the time for one cycle is 0.01 second. Number 14. What happens to a signal's frequency as its wavelength gets longer? It goes down. Number 15. What does 60 hertz mean? 60 cycles per second. Number 16. What is the name for the distance an AC signal travels during one complete cycle? Wavelength. Number 17. What happens to a signal's wavelength as its frequency increases? It gets shorter. Number 18. Electrical energy at a frequency of 7,125 kilohertz is in what frequency range? Radio. Number 19. Current in an AC circuit goes through a complete cycle in 0.1 second. This means AC has a frequency of 10 hertz. Number 20. What term means the number of times per second that an alternating current flows back and forth? Frequency. Number 21. The wavelength for a frequency of 25 megahertz is 12 meters, or 39.4 feet. Number 22. The velocity of propagation of radiofrequency energy in free space is 300,000 kilometers per second. Number 23. The speed of a radio wave is the same as the speed of light. Number 24. The wavelength corresponding to a frequency of 2 megahertz is 150 meters, or 492 feet. Number 25. Which of these amateur bands may be heavily occupied by license-exempt devices? 902 to 928 megahertz. Number 26. What is frequency coordination on VHF and UHF bands? A process that seeks to carefully assign frequencies so as to minimize interference with neighboring repeaters. Number 27. Which of the following statements is not correct? A person may operate radio apparatus licensed in the amateur service on aeronautical, marine, and land mobile frequencies. Number 28. Radio amateur operations are not protected from interference caused by another service operating in which of the following bands? 902 to 928 megahertz. Number 29. An amateur radio stations may communicate only with other amateur stations. Welcome back. This is Chapter 6, Propagation. There is 78 questions in this chapter, guys. Number 1. Which of the following answers is not correct? Based on the bandwidth required, the following modes may be transmitted in these frequencies. Single sideband. Number 2. What is the best method to tell if a band is open for communication with a particular distant location? Listen for signals from that area from an amateur beacon station or a foreign broadcast or television station on a nearby frequency. Number 3. Which of the following is not a scatter mode? Inverted scatter. Number 4. What effect is responsible for propagating a VHF signal over 800 kilometers, 500 miles? Tropospheric ducting. Number 5. What is a characteristic of HF scatter signals? Rapid flutter or hollow sounding distortion. Number 6. In which frequency range is meteor scatter most effective for extended range communication? 300 to 100 megahertz. Number 7. What kind of unusual HF allows weak signals from the skip zone to be heard occasionally? Scatter mode. Number 8. On the HF bands, when is scatter propagation most likely involved? When weak and distorted signals near or above the maximum usable frequency, MUF, can be heard over unusual paths. Number 9. Meteor scatter is the most effective on what band? 6 meters. Number 10. Which of the following is not a scatter mode? Absorption scatter. Number 11. Why are HF scatter signals usually weak? Only a small part of the signal energy is scattered into the skip zone. Number 12. What emission modes are best for aerial propagation? CW and SSB. Number 13. If you receive a weak, distorted signal from a distant and close to the maximum usable frequency, what type of propagation is probably occurring? Scatter. Number 14. What type of radio wave propagation allows a signal to be detected at a distance too far for ground wave propagation, but too near for normal skywave propagation? Scatter. Number 15. Excluding enhanced propagation modes, what is the approximate range of normal VHF tropospheric propagation? 800 kilometers or 500 miles. Number 16. What makes HF scatter signals often sound distorted? Energy scattered into the skip zone through several radio wave paths. Number 17. The radio wave which follows a path from the transmitter to the ionosphere and back to Earth is known correctly as the ionosphere wave. Number 18. Reception of a high frequency HF radio waves beyond 4,000 kilometers is generally possible by ionospheric wave. Number 19. At a lower HF frequencies, radio communication out to 200 kilometers is made possible by ground wave. Number 20. What causes the ionosphere to form? Solar radiation ionizing the outer atmosphere. Number 21. When a signal is returned to Earth by the ionosphere, what is this called? Skywave propagation. Number 22. Skywave is another name for ionospheric wave. Number 23. What type of propagation usually occurs from one handheld VHF transceiver to another nearby? Line of sight propagation. Number 24. The distance traveled by ground waves is less at higher frequencies. Number 25. That portion of radiation which is directly affected by the surface of the Earth is called ground wave. Number 26. How are VHF signals propagated within the range of the visible horizon? By direct wave. Number 27. How does the range of skywave propagation compare to ground wave propagation? It is much longer. Number 28. Skip distance is the minimum distance reached by a signal after one reflection by the ionosphere. Number 29. What causes selective fading? Phase differences between radio wave components of the same transmission as experienced at the receiving station. Number 30. Two or more parts of the radio wave follow different paths during propagation, and this may result in phase differences at the receiver. This change at the receiver is called fading. Number 31. What effect does the D region of the ionosphere have on lower frequency HF signals in the daytime? It absorbs the signals. Number 32. The distance from the transmitter to the nearest point where the sky wave returns to the Earth is called the skip distance. Number 33. If the height of the reflecting layer of the ionosphere increases, the skip distance of a high frequency or HF transmission becomes greater. 34. How does the bandwidth of a transmitted signal affect selective fading? It is more pronounced at wide bandwidth. 35. For radio signals, the skip distance is determined by the height of the ionosphere and the angle of the radiation. Number 36. Number 36. Where in the ionosphere does auroral activity occur? At the E region height. Number 37. Polarization change often takes place on radio waves that are propagated over long distances. Which of these does not cause polarization change? Parabolic interaction. Number 38. On the VHF and UHF bands, polarization of the receiving antenna is very important in relation to the transmitting antenna. Yet on AHF bands, it is relatively unimportant. Why is that so? The ionosphere can change polarization of the signal from moment to moment. Number 39. When a transmitted radio signal reaches a station by a 1-hop and 2-hop skip path, small changes in the ionosphere can cause variations in the ground wave. Number 40. Skip distance is a term associated with signals from the ionosphere. Skip effects are due to reflection and refraction from the ionosphere. Number 41. The distance to Europe from your location is approximately 5,000 kilometers. What sort of propagation is most likely to be involved? Multi-hop. Number 42. The unusual effect of the ionospheric storms is to cause a fade out of sky wave signals. Number 43. A change or variation in signal strength at the antenna caused by differences in path lengths is called fading. Number 44. What causes distant AM broadcast in 160-meter ham band stations not to be heard during the daytime hours? The ionization of the D region. Number 45. The skip distance of a skywave will be greatest when the angle between the ground and radiation is the smallest. Number 46. What causes the maximum usable frequency to vary? The amount of radiation received from the sun, mainly ultraviolet. Number 47. All communication frequencies throughout the spectrum are affected in varying degrees by the atmospheric conditions. Number 48. How do sunspots change the ionization of the atmosphere? The more sunspots there are, the greater the ionization. Number 49. How long is an average sunspot cycle? 11 years. Number 50. What influences all radio communications beyond ground wave or line of sight ranges? Solar activity. Number 51. What is one way to determine if the maximum usable frequency, or MUF, is high enough to support 28 MHz propagation between your station and Western Europe? Listen for signals on the 10 beacon frequency. Number 52. What does maximum usable frequency mean? The highest frequency signal that will reach its intended destination. Number 53. Which two types of radiation from the sun influence propagation? electromagnetic, and particle emissions. Number 54. Average duration of a solar cycle is 11 years. Number 55. What can be done at an amateur station to continue HF communications during a sudden ionosphere disturbance? Try a higher frequency. Number 56. What happens to signals higher in frequency than the critical frequency? They pass through the ionosphere. Number 57. Reflection of an SSB transmission from the ionosphere causes little or no phase shift distortion. Number 58. Propagation cycles have a period of approximately 11 years. Number 59. What usually happens to radio waves with frequencies below the maximum usable frequency, MUF, when they are sent into the ionosphere? They are bent. Number 60. What is solar flux index? A measure of solar activity that is taken at a specific frequency. Number 61. The ability of the ionosphere to reflect higher frequency radio signals depends on the amount of solar radiation. Number 62. When the sunspot numbers are high, how is propagation affected? Frequencies up to 40 megahertz or higher are normally usable for long-distance communication. 63. What is solar flux? The radio energy emitted by the sun. Number 64. What is a sporadic E condition? Patches. Number 65. In the northern hemisphere, in which direction should a directional antenna be pointed to take maximum advantage of aerial propagation? North. Number 66. What causes tropospheric ducting of radio waves? A temperature. Number 67. At what point in the solar cycle does the 20-meter band usually support worldwide propagation during daylight hours? At any point in the solar cycle. Number 68. Communication on the 80-meter band is generally most difficult during daytime in the summer. Number 69. During summer daytime, which bands are the most difficult for communications beyond ground wave? 160 and 80 meters. Number 70. What effect does tropospheric bending have on a 2-meter radio waves? It lets you contact stations further away. Number 71. That portion of the radiation kept close to the Earth's surface during bending in the atmosphere is called the tropospheric wave. Number 72. On which amateur frequency band is the extended distance propagation effect of sporadic E most often observed? 6 meter. 73. Which ionospheric region most affects skywave propagation on the 6-meter band? The E region. Number 74. The optimum working frequency provides the best long-range HF communication compared with the maximum usable frequency, MUF, is usually slightly lower. Number 75. If we transmit a signal, the frequency of which is so high we no longer receive a reflection from the ionosphere, the signal frequency is above the maximum usable frequency, or MUF. Number 76. When is the ionosphere most ionized? Midday. Number 77. What is the maximum distance among the Earth's surface that is normally covered in one hop using the F2 region? 4,000 kilometers or 2,500 miles. Number 78. When is the ionosphere least ionized? Shortly before dawn. Welcome back. It's Chapter 7, Transmission Lines. There are 59 questions in this chapter. Number 1. The unit decibel is used to indicate a mathematical ratio. Number 2. A 2-time increase in power results in a change of how many dB? 3 dB higher. Number 3. A local amateur reports that your 100-watt 2-meter simplex VHF transmission as 30 dB over S9. To reduce your signal to S9, you would reduce your power to watts. 100 megawatts. Number 4. How can you decrease your transmitter power by 3 dB? Divide your original power by 2. Number 5. How can you increase your transmitter power by 6 dB? Multiply the original power by 4. Number 6. If the frequency is increased, how would this affect the loss on a transmission line? It would increase. Number 7. What factors determine the characteristic impedance of a coaxial antenna feed line? The ratio of the diameter of the inner conductor to the diameter of the braid. Number 8. What is a parallel conductor feed line? 2 wires side by side held apart by insulating rods. Number 9. A transmission line differs from an ordinary circuit or network in communications or signaling devices in one very important way. That important aspect is propagation delay. Number 10. The characteristic impedance of a parallel wire transmission line does not depend on the velocity of energy on the line. Number 11. The characteristic impedance of a 20-meter piece of transmission line is 52 ohms. If 10 meters were cut off, the impedance would be 52 ohms. Number 12. The characteristic impedance of a transmission line is equal to the pure resistance which, if connected to the end of the line, will absorb all the power arriving along with it. Number 13. The characteristic impedance of a transmission line is determined by the physical dimensions and relative positions of the conductors. Number 14. What factors determine the characteristic impedance of a parallel conductor antenna feed line? The distance between the centers of the conductors and the radius of the conductors. Number 15. The impedance of a coaxial line can be the same for different diameter line. Number 16. What is a coaxial cable? A center wire inside an insulating material which is covered by a metal sleeve or shield. Number 17. What commonly available antenna feed line can be buried directly in the ground for some distance without adverse effects? Coax cable. Number 18. What connects your transceiver to your antenna? A feed line. Number 19. Where would you install a balun to feed a dipole antenna with 50 ohm coax cable? Between the coax cable and the antenna. Number 20. What kind of antenna feed line is made of conductors held apart by insulated rods? An open conductor ladder line. Number 21. What commonly available antenna feed line can be buried directly in the ground for some distance without adverse effects? Coax cable. Number 22. What does the term balun mean? Balanced to unbalanced. Number 23. If the length of a coax feed line is increased from 20 meters, or 65.6 feet, to 40 meters, or 131.2 feet, how would this affect the line loss? It would be increased by 100%. Number 24. What is an unbalanced line? Feed line with one conductor connected to the ground. Number 25. As the length of a feed line is changed, what happens to the signal loss? Signal loss increases as the length increases. Number 26. What is the best antenna feed line to use if it must be put near grounded metal objects? Coax cable. Number 27. The lowest lost feed line on HF is open wire. Number 28. Why does coax cable make a good antenna transmission line? It is waterproof and its impedance matches most amateur antennas. Number 29. A 75 ohm transmission line could be matched to the 300 ohm feed point of an antenna by using a 4-to-1 impedance transformer or balun. Number 30. Why should you use only good quality coax cable and conductors for a UHF antenna system? To keep the RF loss low. Number 31. If your transmitter and antenna are 15 meters apart, but are connected by 65 meters of RG58 coax cable, what should be done to reduce the feed line loss? Shorten the access cable. Number 32. If you install a 6-meter Yagi antenna on a tower 50 meters from your transmitter, which of the following feed lines is the best? RG213. Number 33. When antenna feed lines must be placed near grounded metal objects, which of the following feed lines should be used? Coax cable. Number 34. Losses occurring on a transmission line between transmitter and antenna result in less RF power being radiated. Number 35. Why should you regularly clean, tighten, and resolder all antenna connectors? To help keep their resistance at a minimum. Number 36. A balanced transmission line is made of 2 parallel wires. Number 37. TV twin lead feed lines can be used for a feed line in an amateur station. The impedance of this line is approximately 300 ohms. Number 38. What common connector usually joins RG213 coax cable to an HF transceiver? A PL259 connector. Number 39. A flexible coax line contains braid and insulation around the center conductor. Number 40. In what values are RF feed line losses expressed? dB per unit length. Number 41. What common connector usually joins a handheld transceiver to its antenna? A BNC connector. Number 42. What are some reasons to use parallel conductor feed lines? It will operate with a high SWR and has less loss than coax cable. Number 43. What are some reasons not to use parallel conductor feed line? It does not work well when tied down to metal objects, and you must use an impedance matching device with your transceiver. Number 44. Which of these common connectors has the lowest loss at UHF? A type N connector. 45. What kind of antenna transmission line can be constructed using two conductors which are maintained a uniform distance apart using insulated spreaders? 600 ohm open wire. Number 46. What device can be installed to a feed balanced? Number 46. What device can be installed to feed a balanced antenna with an unbalanced feed line? A balun. Number 47. As the frequency of a signal is changed, what happens to signal loss in a feed line? Signal loss increases with increasing frequency. Number 48. If the impedance terminating a transmission line differs significantly from the characteristic impedance of the line, what will be observed at the input of the line? Some value of impedance influenced by line length. Number 49. What does an SWR reading of 1:1 mean? Best impedance match has been made. Number 50. What does an SWR reading of less than 1.5 to 1 mean? A fairly good impedance match. Number 51. What does standing wave radio mean? Number 51. What does standing wave ratio mean? The ratio of maximum to minimum voltages on a transmission line. Number 52. If your antenna transmission line gets hot when you are transmitting, what might this mean? The SWR may be too high or the transmission line loss may be too high. Number 53. If the characteristic impedance of the feed line does not match the antenna input impedance, then standing waves are produced in the feed line. Number 54. The result of the presence of standing waves on a transmission line is reduced transfer of RF energy to the antenna. Number 55. An SW meter measures the degree of match between transmission line and antenna by comparing the forward and reflected voltage. Number 56. A resonant antenna having a feed point impedance of 200 ohms is connected to a transmission line and transmitted which has an impedance of 50 ohms. What will the standing ratio of this system be? 4:1. The type of transmission line best suited to operating at a high standing wave ratio is 600 ohm open wire. Number 58. If an antenna is correctly matched to a transmitter, the length of transmission line will have no effect on the matching. Number 59. If the center impedance of a folded dipole is approximately 300 ohms and you are using RG8U 50 ohms coax lines, what is the ratio required to have the line and antenna matched? 6:1. Hi, and welcome back. This is Chapter 8, Antennas. There is 76 questions in this chapter. Chapter 1. Which type of antenna would be a good choice of part of a portable HF amateur station that could be set up in case of an emergency? A dipole. Number 2. In a Yagi-Yuta 3-element directional antenna, the blank is primary for mechanical purposes. Boom. Number 3. In a Yagi-Uda 3-element directional antenna, the blank is the longest radiating element. Reflector. In a Yagi-Uda 3-element directional antenna, the blank is the shortest radiating element. Director. Number 5. In a Yagi-Uda 3-element directional antenna, the blank is not the longest nor the shortest radiating element. Driven element. Number 6. Why is a 5/8 wavelength vertical antenna better than a 1/4 length vertical antenna for VHF or UHF mobile operations? A 5/8 wavelength antenna has more gain. Number 7. What is an advantage of downward sloping radials on a ground plane antenna? It brings the feed point impedance to 50 ohms. Number 8. If a magnetic-based whip antenna is placed on the roof of a car, in what direction does it send out radio energy? It goes out equally well in all horizontal directions. Number 9. The main characteristic of a vertical antenna that it will receive signals equally from all compass points around it. Number 10. Why is loading coil often used with an HF mobile vertical antenna? To tune out capacitive reactance. Number 11. How many directional driven elements do most Yagi antennas have? 1. Number 12. Number 12. Approximately how long is the driven element of a Yagi antenna for 14.0 megahertz? 10.21 meters or 33 feet and 6 inches. Number 13. The delta loop antenna consists of 2 or more triangular structures mounted on a boom. The overall length of the driven element is approximately 1 wavelength. Number 14. Approximately how long is the director element of a Yagi antenna for 21.1 megahertz? 6.4 meters or 21 feet. Number 15. How do you calculate the length in meters or feet of a 1/4 wavelength vertical antenna? Divide 71.5 or 234 by the antenna's operating frequency in megahertz. Number 16. What is the main reason why so many VHF base and mobile antennas are 5/8 of a wavelength? The angle of radiation is low. Number 17. If you made a 1/4 wavelength vertical antenna for 21.125 megahertz, how long would it be? 3.36 or 11 feet. Number 18. What happens to the feed point impedance of a ground plane antenna when its radials are changed from horizontal to downward sloping? It increases. Number 19. How long is the reflector element of a Yagi antenna for 28.1 megahertz? 5.33 meters or 17.5 feet. Number 20. If you made a half wavelength vertical antenna for 223 megahertz, how long would it be? 64 centimeters or 25.2 inches. Number 21. What is one effect of increasing the boom length and adding directors to a Yagi antenna? Gain increases. Number 22. Which of the following transmission lines will give the best match to the base of a 1/4 wave ground plane antenna? 50 ohms coax cable. Number 23. What does the term antenna front to back ratio mean in reference to a delta loop antenna? 1:1. Number 24. What is the term antenna front to back ratio mean in reference to a delta loop antenna? 1:2. What does the term antenna front to back ratio mean in reference to a delta loop antenna? 1:3. What does the term antenna front to back ratio mean in reference to a delta loop antenna? 1::ि Number 25. The power radiated in major radiation lobe compared to the power radiated in exactly the opposite direction. Number 24. What does antenna front to back ratio mean in reference to a Yagi antenna? The power radiated in the major radiation lobe compared to the power radiated in exactly the opposite direction. Number 25. Approximately how long is each side of a cubical quad antenna driven element for 14.3 MHz? 5.36 meters or 17.6 feet. Number 26. The spacing between the elements on a 3-element Yagi antenna representing the best overall choice is blank of a wavelength. 0.2. Number 27. The impedance in ohms at the free point of the dipole and folded dipole are respectively, 73 and 300. Number 28. Which statement about the 2-element delta loop and quad antenna is true? They compare favorably with the 3-element Yagi. Number 29. Approximately, how long is each side of a cubical quad antenna driven element for 21.4 MHz? 3.54 meters or 11.7 feet. Number 30. Approximately how long is each leg of a spherical delta loop antenna driven element for 28.7 MHz? 3.5 meters or 11.5 feet. Number 31. The cubical quad or quad antenna consists of 2 or more square loops of wire. The driven element has approximately over all length of 1 wavelength. Number 32. Moving the feed point of a multi-element quad antenna from a side parallel to the ground to a side perpendicular to the ground will have what effect? It will change the antenna polarization from horizontal to vertical. Number 33. What is one disadvantage of a random wire antenna? You may experience RF feedback in your station. Number 34. What is a cubical quad antenna? 2 or more parallel 4-sided wire loops, each approximately 1 electrical wavelength long. Number 35. If you were to cut a wavelength... Number 35. If you were to cut a half-wave dipole for 3.75 MHz, what would be its approximate length? 38 meters or 125 feet. Number 36. Why is a Yagi antenna often used for radio communications in the 20-meter band? It helps reduce interference from other stations off to the side or behind. Number 37. Compared to a dipole antenna, what are the directional characteristics of a cubical quad antenna? The quad has more directivity in both horizontal and vertical planes. Number 38. What is a disadvantage of using an antenna equipped with traps? It will radiate harmonics. Number 39. If you made a half-wavelength dipole antenna for 28.550 MHz, how long would it be? 5.08 meters or 16.62 feet. Number 40. What is a good way to get a maximum performance from a Yagi antenna? Optimize the lengths and spacing of the elements. Number 41. What are some advantages of a Yagi with wide element spacing? High gain, less critical tuning, and wider bandwidth. Number 42. What is an advantage of using a trap antenna? It may be used for multi-band operation. Number 43. How does a bandwidth of a folded dipole antenna compare with that of a simple dipole antenna? It is greater. Number 44. What is a delta loop antenna? A type of cubical quad antenna except with triangular elements rather than square. Number 45. A dipole transmitting antenna placed so that the ends are pointing north-south radiates mostly to the east and to the west. Number 46. What is the low-angle radiation pattern of an ideal half-wavelength dipole HF antenna installed parallel to the Earth? It is a figure 8 perpendicular to the antenna. Number 47. If the forward gain of a 6-element Yagi is about 10 dB, what would the gain of 2 of these antennas be if they were stacked? 13 dB. If an antenna is made longer, what happens to its resonant frequency? It decreases. Number 49. If an antenna is made shorter, what happens to its resonant frequency? It increases. Number 50. Adding a series inductance to antenna would decrease the resonant frequency. Number 51. The resonant frequency of an antenna may be increased by shortening the radiating element. Number 52. At the end of a suspended antenna wire, insulators are used. These act to limit the electrical length of the antenna. Number 53. To lower resonant frequency of an antenna, the operator should lengthen it. Number 54. One solution to multiband operation with a shortened radiator is the trap dipole or the trap vertical. These traps are actually a coil and capacitor in parallel. Number 55. Polarization of an antenna is determined by the orientation of the electric field relative to the Earth's surface. Number 56. If a parasitic element slightly shorter than a horizontal dipole is placed parallel to the dipole 0.1 wavelength away from it and at the same height, what effect will this have on the antenna's radiation pattern? A major lobe will develop in the horizontal plane from the dipole toward the parasitic element. Number 57. If a parasitic element slightly longer than a horizontal dipole is placed parallel to the dipole 0.1 wavelength away from it, and at the same height, what will the effect have on this antenna's radiation pattern? A major lobe will develop in the horizontal plane from the parasitic element towards the dipole. Number 58. What is the antenna radiation pattern for an isotropic radiator? A sphere. Number 59. Approximately how much gain does a half-wave dipole have over an isotropic radiator? 2.1 dB. Number 60. How can a bandwidth of a parasitic beam antenna be increased? Use larger diameter elements. Number 61. What does horizontal wave polarization mean? The electric lines of force are parallel to the Earth's surface. Number 62. What does vertical wave polarization mean? The magnetic lines of force of a radio wave are perpendicular to the Earth's surface. Number 63. What electromagnetic wave polarization does a Yagi antenna have when its elements are parallel to the Earth's surface? Horizontal. Number 64. What electromagnetic wave polarization does a half-wavelength antenna have when it's perpendicular to the Earth's surface? Vertical. An isotropic and Number 65. An isotropic antenna is a Hypothetical point source. Number 66. VHF signals from a mobile station using a vertical whip antenna will nominally best be receiving using a vertical ground plane antenna. Number 67. A dipole antenna will emit a vertically polarized wave if it is mounted vertically. Number 68. If an electromagnetic wave leaves an antenna vertically polarized, it will arrive at the receiving antenna by ground wave vertically polarized. Number 69. Compared with a horizontal antenna, a vertical antenna will receive a vertically polarized radio wave at a greater strength. Number 70. What is a parasitic beam antenna? An antenna where elements obtain their radio energy by induction or radiation from a driven element. Number 70. The property on an antenna which defines the range of frequencies to which it will respond is called its bandwidth. Number 72. What is meant by antenna gain? The numerical ratio relating to the radiated signal strength of an antenna to that of another antenna. Number 73. What is meant by antenna bandwidth? The frequency range over which the antenna may be expected to perform well. Number 74. In free space, what is the radiation characteristic of a half-wave dipole? Minimum radiation from the ends, maximum broadside. Number 75. The gain of an antenna, especially on VHF and above, is quoted in dBi. The I in this expression stands for isotropic. Number 76. The front-to-back ratio of a beam antenna is the ratio of the maximum forward power in the major lobe to the maximum backward power radiation. Hi, and welcome back. This is Chapter 9, Active Devices. There are 45 questions in this chapter. Number 1. The diode is an important part of a simple power supply. It converts AC to DC since it allows electrons to flow in only one direction from cathode to anode. Number 2. The increase in signal level by an amplifier is called gain. Number 3. The primary purpose of a Zener diode is to regulate or maintain a constant voltage. Number 4. Which of the following is not a property of an amplifier? Loss. Number 5. A device with gain has the property of amplification. Number 6. The electrodes of a semiconductor diode are known as anode and cathode. Number 7. Amplifiers can amplify voltage, current, or power. Number 8. Zener diodes are used as voltage regulators. Number 9. Which of the following is not amplified by an amplifier? Resistance. Number 10. A device labeled gain equals 10 dB is likely to be an amplifier. Number 11. In a bipolar transistor, the blank compares closest to the cathode of a triode vacuum tube. Emitter. Number 12. A semiconductor is described as general-purpose audio NPN device. This would be a bipolar transistor. Number 13. 3 leads from a PNP transistor are named collector, emitter, and base. Number 14. Which component can amplify a small signal using a low voltage? A PNP transistor. Number 15. The basic semiconductor amplifying device is the transistor. Number 16. In a bipolar transistor, the blank compares closest to the plate of a triode vacuum tube. Collector. Number 17. Voltage regulation is the principal application of the Zener diode. Number 18. If a low-level signal is placed at the input of a transistor, a higher level of signal is produced at the output lead. This effect is known as amplification. Number 19. The two basic types of field effect transistors, or FET, are N and P channel. Number 20. In a semiconductor diode, electrons flow from cathode to anode. Number 21. In order for a diode to conduct, it must be forward biased. Number 22. Two basic types of bipolar transistors are NPN and PNP types. Number 23. A semiconductor having its leads labeled gate, drain, and source is best described as a field effect transistor. Number 24. What semiconductor device glows red, yellow, or green depending on its chemical composition? A light-emitting diode. Number 25. A transistor can be destroyed in a circuit by excessive heat. Number 26. In a bipolar transistor, the blank compares closest to the control grid of a triode vacuum tube. Base. Number 27. Bipolar transistors usually have 3 leads. Number 28. In a vacuum tube, the electrode that is usually a cylinder of wire mesh is the grid. Number 29. In a vacuum tube, the electrode that is operated with the highest positive potential is the plate. Number 30. What is one reason a triode vacuum tube might be used instead of a transistor in a circuit? It may be able to handle higher power. Number 31. The drain of a field effect transistor corresponds to the blank of a bipolar transistor. Collector. Number 32. Which semiconductor device has characteristics most similar to a triode vacuum tube? Field effect transistor. Number 33. In a vacuum tube, the electrode that emits electrons is the cathode. Number 34. Which component can amplify a small signal but must use high voltages? A vacuum tube. Number 35. In a field effect transistor, the blank is the terminal where the charge carriers leave the channel. Drain. Number 36. In a vacuum tube, the element that is furthest away from the plate is the filament or heater. Number 37. Which two elements in a field effect transistor exhibit fairly similar characteristics? Source and drain. Number 38. The source of a field effect transistor corresponds to the blank of a bipolar transistor. Emitter. Number 39. In a field effect transistor, the blank is the terminal where the charge carriers enter the channel. Source. Number 40. What is inside the envelope of a triode tube? A vacuum. Number 41. The control element in the field effect transistor is the gate. Number 42. If you wish to reduce the current flowing in the field effect transistor, you could increase the reverse bias voltage. Number 43. In a field effect transistor, the blank is the terminal that controls the conductance of the channel. Gate. Number 44. A feature common to tubes and transistors that is both can amplify the signals. Number 45. How many grids are there in a triode vacuum tube? 1. Hi, this is Chapter 10, Power Supplies. There are 21 questions in this chapter. Number 1. In a regulated power supply, the blank is between the input and the rectifier. Transformer. Number 2. In a regulated power supply, the transformer connects to an external source which is referred to as input. Number 3. In a regulated power supply, the blank is between the transformer and the filter. Rectifier. Number 4. In a regulated power supply, the blank is connected to the regulator. Output. Number 5. In a regulated power supply, the output of the filter connects to the regulator. In a regulated power supply, the output of the rectifier is connected to the filter. Which of these usually needs a heavy-duty power supply? A transceiver. Number 8. A power supply DC at 12 volts at 5 amps, the power transformer should be rated higher than 60 watts. Number 9. What may cause a buzzing or hum in the signal of an AC-powered transmitter? A bad filter capacitor in the transmitter power supply. Number 10. To convert AC to pulsating DC, you should use a diode. Number 11. If your mobile transceiver works in your car but not in your home, what should you check first? The power supply. Number 12. What device converts household current to 12V DC? A power supply. Number 13. You have a very loud, low-frequency hum appearing on your transmission. What part of the transmitter would you first look for the trouble? The power supply. If alternating current is applied to the anode of a diode, what would you expect to see at the cathode? Pulsating direct current. Number 15. The action of changing alternating current to direct current is called rectification. Number 16. How is a voltmeter usually connected to a circuit under test? In parallel with the circuit. Number 17. When measuring current drawn from a DC power supply, it is true to say that the meter will act in circuit as a low-value resistance. Number 18. How is an ammeter usually connected to a circuit under test? In series with the circuit. Number 19. Which of the following meters would you use to measure the power supply drawn by a small handheld transistorized receiver? A DC ammeter. Number 20. When measuring the current drawn by a power supply, the current meter should be placed in series with one of the receiver power leads. Number 21. In measuring volts and amps. Number 21. In measuring volts and amps, the connection should be made with the voltmeter in parallel and ammeter in series. Hi, this is Chapter 11, Establishing a Station. There are 29 questions in this chapter. Number 1. What kind of amateur station automatically retransmits the signals of other stations? A repeater station. Number 2. Of the components in an HF station, which component would normally be connected closest to the antenna tuner, and dummy load? antenna switch. Number 3. In an HF station, the antenna tuner is usually used for matching the transceiver with most antennas when operating below 14 MHz. Number 4. Of the components in an HF station, which component will be used to match impedances between the transceiver and the antenna? The antenna tuner. Number 5. In an HF station, which component is temporarily connected to the tuning process? Dummy load. Number 6. In an HF station, the antenna tuner is commonly used with most antennas when operating below 14 MHz. Number 7. Which component in an HF station is the most useful for determining the effectiveness of the antenna system? SWR bridge. Number 8. In designing an HF station, which component would you use to reduce the effects of harmonic radiation? A low-pass filter. Number 9. A low-pass filter in an HF station is most effective when connected as close as possible to the transceiver output. Number 10. A low-pass filter in an HF station is most effective when connected as close as possible to the linear amplifier output. Number 11. Which of the following describes full break-in telegraphy? Incoming signals are received between transmitted Morse dots. Number 12. Which is one way to shorten transmitter tune-up time on the air to cut down on interference? Tune the transmitter into a dummy load. Number 13. How can on-the-air interference be minimized during a lengthy transmitter testing or loading up procedure? Use a dummy load. Number 14. Why would you use a dummy antenna? To allow antenna tuning without causing interference. Number 15. In a digital system, the modem is connected to the computer. Number 16. In a digital system, the transceiver is connected to the modem. Number 17. In a digital system, the blank interfaces with the computer. Input, output. Number 18. In an amateur digital radio system, the audio connections of the modem or sound card modem are connected to the transceiver. Number 19. What may happen if an SSB transmitter is operating with Number 19. What may happen if an SSB transmitter is operating with too much speech processing? It may cause splatter interference to other stations operating near its frequency. Number 20. A mismatched antenna or transmission line may present an incorrect load to the transmitter. The result may be full power will not be transferred to the antenna. Number 21. What may happen if an SSB transmitter is operated with the microphone gain set too high? It may cause splatter interference to other stations operating near its frequency. Number 22. The input power to the final stage of your transmitter is 200 watts, and the output is 125 watts. What has happened to the remaining power? It has dissipated as heat loss. Number 23. How should the microphone gain control be adjusted on a single sideband phone transmitter? For slight movement of the ALC meter on modulation peaks. Number 24. One result of a slight mismatch between the power amplifier of a transmitter and the antenna would be reduced antenna radiation. Number 25. The difference between DC input power and RF output power of a transmitter RF amplifier appears as heat dissipation. Number 26. The automatic level control, or ALC, in an SSB transmitter controls the peak audio input so that the final amplifier is not overdriven. Number 27. What is the result of an over-deviation in an FM transmitter? Out-of-channel emissions. Number 28. What can you do if you are told your FM handheld or mobile transceiver is over-deviating? Talk further away from the microphone. Number 29. You are transmitting FM on the 2-meter band. Several stations advise you that your transmission is distorted. A quick check with a frequency counter tells you that the transmitter is on the proper frequency. Which of the following is the most probable cause of the distortion? The frequency deviation of your transmitter is set too high. Hello there, this is Chapter 12, Routine Operations. There is 102 questions in this chapter. Number 1. The call sign of an amateur station must be transmitted at the beginning and at the end of each exchange of communications, and at the intervals not greater than 30 minutes. Number 2. What is the longest period of time an amateur station can operate without transmitting its call sign? 30 minutes. Number 3. The call sign of an amateur station must be sent at the beginning and the end of each exchange of communications, and at least every 30 minutes while in communications. Number 4. Why is it a good idea to have a way to operate your amateur station without using commercial AC power lines? So you may provide communications in an emergency. Number 5. What is the proper Q signal to use to see if a frequency is in use before transmitting on CW? QRL. Number 6. What is a QSL card? A written proof of communication between two amateurs. Number 7. The Q signal indicating that you want the other station to send slower is QRS. Number 8. What is an azimuthal map? A map projection centered on a particular location, used to determine the shortest path between 2 points on the Earth's surface. Number 9. What is the meaning of the Q signal QRS? Send more slowly. Number 10. What is the proper Q signal to use to ask if someone is calling you on CW? QRZ. Number 11. What is the proper distress call to use when operating the phone? Say Mayday several times. Number 12. Station logs and confirmation QSL cards are always kept in UTC, or Universal Time Coordinated. Where is that time based? Greenwich, England. Number 13. If you are in contact with another station and you hear an emergency call for help on your frequency, what should you do? Immediately stop your contact and take the emergency call. Number 14. What method is used by radio amateurs to provide written proof of communication between two amateur stations? A signed postcard listing contact date, time, frequency, mode, and power, called a QSL card. What is the one meaning of the Q signal QSY? Change frequency. Number 16. In order of priority, a distress message comes before an urgency message. Number 17. The signal QRN means I am troubled by static. Number 18. When you use your amateur station to transmit an SOS or Mayday in a life-threatening distress situation. Number 19. If you are communicating with another amateur station and hear a station in distress breaks in, what should you do? Acknowledge the station in distress and determine its location and what assistance may be needed. Number 20. To set your station clock accurately to UTC, you could receive the most accurate time off the air from CHU, WWV, or WWVH. Number 21. What is the proper distress call to use when operating CW? SOS. Number 22. Which statement about recording all contacts and unanswered CQ calls in a station logbook or computer log is not correct? A logbook is required by Industry Canada. Number 23. Why would it be useful to have an azimuthal world map centered on the location of your station? Because it shows the compass bearing from your station to any place on Earth for antenna planning and pointing. Number 24. You hear other local stations talking to radio amateurs in New Zealand, but you don't hear those stations with your beam aimed on the normal compass bearing to New Zealand. What should you try? Point your beam 180 degrees away from the bearing and listen for the stations arriving on the long path. Number 25. The signal QRM signifies I am being interfered with. Number 26. When referring to contacts in the station log, what do the letters UTC mean? Universal Time Coordinated, formerly Greenwich Mean Time, or GMT. Number 27. If you hear distress traffic and are unable to render assistance, you should contact authorities and then maintain watch until you are certain that assistance will be forthcoming. Number 28. What is the most useful type of map to use when orientating a directional HF antenna towards a distant station? Azimuthal. Number 29. The Q signal, which signifies I will call you again, is QRX. Number 30. What is the most important accessory to have for handheld radio in an emergency? Several sets of charged batteries. Number 39. What is the meaning of your signal report is 5.9 plus 20 dB? A relative signal strength meter reading is 20 dB greater than strength 9. Number 32. If you are the net-controlled station of a daily HF net, what should you do if the frequency on which you normally meet is in use just before the net begins? Call and ask the occupants to relinquish the frequency for the scheduled net, but if they are not agreeable, conduct the net on a frequency 3 to 5 kHz away from the original net frequency. Number 33. What is the meaning of your signal report is 1-1? Your signal is unreadable and barely perceptible. Number 34. What is the standard international phonetic for the letter G? Golf. Number 35. What is the standard international phonetic for the letter A? Alpha. Number 36. What is the standard international phonetic for the letter I? India. Number 37. What is the meaning of the term 73? Best regards. Number 38. What does RST 579 mean in Morse code contact? Your signal is perfectly readable, moderately or fairly strong, with a perfect tone. Number 39. What can you use as an aid for correct station identification when using phone? The Standard International Phonetic Alphabet. Number 40. What are RST signal reports? A short way to describe signal reception. Number 41. What is a good way to make contact on a repeater? Say the call sign of the station you want to contact and then your call sign. Number 42. What is the meaning of your signal report is 33? Your signal is readable with considerable difficulty and weak in strength. Number 43. If a net is about to begin on a frequency which you and another station are using, what should you do? As a courtesy to the net, move to a different frequency. Number 44. What does RST459 mean in a Morse code contact? Your signal is quite readable, fair strength, and with perfect tone. Number 45. What is meant by the term DX? Distant station. Number 46. What does RST mean in signal report? Readability, signal strength, and tone. Number 47. When selecting a CW transmitting frequency, what minimum frequency separation from a contact in progress should you allow to minimize interference? 150 to 500 Hz. Number 48. Good Morse telegraphy operators listen to the frequency to make sure that it is not in use before transmitting. 49. FM repeater operation on 2-meter band uses one frequency for transmission and one for reception. The difference in frequency between the transmit and receive frequency is normally 600 kilohertz. Number 50. Which sideband is commonly used on 3,755 kilohertz for phone operation? Lower. Number 51. What is the correct way to call CQ when using Morse code? Send the letter CQ 3 times, followed by DE, followed by your call sign sent 3 times. Number 52. What is the meaning of your signal report is 57? Your signal is perfectly readable and moderately or fairly strong. Number 53. What is the correct way to call CQ when using voice? Say CQ 3 times, followed by this is, followed by your call sign spoken 3 times. Number 54. What is a CTCSS or PL tone? A sub-audible tone added to a carrier which may cause receiver to accept a signal. Number 55. What is simplex operation? Transmitting and receiving on the same frequency. Number 56. What is the purpose of a repeater timeout timer? It limits the amount of time someone can transmit on a repeater. Number 57. If propagation changes during your contact and you notice increasing interference from other activity on the same frequency, what should you do? Move your contact to another frequency. Number 58. What should you do before you transmit on a frequency? Listen to make sure others are not using the frequency. Number 59. Why should local amateur communications use VHF and UHF frequencies instead of HF frequencies? To minimize interference on HF bands capable of long-distance communications. Number 60. What is the standard international phonetic for the letter R? Romeo. Number 61. How do you call another station on a repeater if you know the station's call sign? Say the station's call sign, then identify your own station. Number 62. How should you answer a Morse code CQ call? Send the other station's call sign twice, followed by DE, followed by your call station twice. Number 63. Before transmitting, the first thing you should do is listen carefully so as not to interrupt communications already in progress. Number 64. How should you answer a voice CQ call? Say the other station's call sign once, followed by "this is," then your call sign given phonetically. If you are operating simplex on a Number 65. If you are operating simplex on a repeater frequency, why would it be good amateur practice to change to another frequency? Changing the repeater's frequency is not practical. Number 66. If you were talking to a station using a repeater, how would you find out if you could communicate using simplex instead? See if you can clearly receive the station on repeater's input frequency. Number 67. To make your call sign better understood when using voice transmissions, what should you do? Use standard international phonetics for each letter of your call sign. Number 68. What is the standard international phonetic for the letter D? Delta. Number 69. What is the proper way to ask someone their location when using a repeater? Where are you? Number 70. Which sideband is commonly used for 20-meter phone operation? Upper. Number 71. When should you use simplex operation instead of a repeater? When a contact is possible without using a repeater. Number 72. Why should you keep transmission short when using a repeater? A long transmission may prevent someone with an emergency from using the repeater. Number 73. What is the meaning of procedural signal K? Any station, please reply. Number 74. At what speed should Morse code CQ be transmitted? At any speed you can reliably receive. Number 75. What is the meaning of the procedural signal DE? From. Number 76. What is the meaning of the procedural signal CQ? Calling any station. Number 77. Why should you pause briefly between transmissions when using a repeater? To listen for anyone else wanting to use the repeater. Number 78. What is the standard international phonetic for the letter E? Echo. Number 79. What is the standard international phonetic for the letter B? Bravo. Number 80. What is the standard international phonetic for the letter L? Lima. Number 81. What is the main purpose of a repeater? To increase the range of portable and mobile stations. Number 82. When selecting a single sideband phone transmitting frequency, what minimum frequency separation from a contact in progress should you allow between suppressed carriers to minimize interference? Approximately 3 kHz. Number 83. What is the standard international phonetic for the letter P? Papa. Number 84. What is the proper way to break into a conversation on a repeater? Say your call sign during a break between transmissions. Number 85. FM receivers perform in an unusual manner when 2 or more stations are present. The loudest signal, even though it is only 2 or 3 times as loud as the other signals, will be the only transmission demodulated. This is called capture effect. Number 86. What does monitoring mean on a packet radio frequency? A receiving station is displaying messages that may not be sent to it and is not replying to any message. Number 87. What does connected mean in packet radio link? A transmitting station is sending data to only one receiving station. It replies to that data is being received correctly. Number 88. Which of the following terms does not apply to packet? Baudot. Number 89. What does network mean in packet radio? A way of connecting packet radio stations so data can be sent over long distance. Number 90. What is a digipeater? A packet radio station that retransmits only data that is marked to be retransmitted. Number 91. When selecting an RTTY transmitting frequency, what minimum frequency separation from a contact in progress should you allow center to center to minimize interference? 250 to 500 Hz. Number 92. When using AM-TOR transmissions, there are two modes that may be utilized. Mode A uses automatic repeat request, or ARQ, protocol, and is normally used for communications after contact has been established. Number 93. Digital transmissions use signals called blank to transmit the states 1 and 0. Mark and space. Number 94. How would you modulate a 2-meter FM transceiver to produce packet radio emissions? Connect a terminal node controller to the transceiver's microphone input. Number 95. Why should we be careful in choosing a simplex frequency when operating VHF and UHF FM? You may inadvertently choose a channel that is an input to a local repeater. Number 96. A distant station asks for a signal report on a local repeater you monitor. What fact affects your assessment? Number 96. A distant station asks for a local signal report on a local repeater you monitor. What fact affects your assessment? The other operator needs to know how well he is received on the repeater, not how well you receiver the repeater. Number 97. What is the meaning of the Q signal QSB? Your signal is faded. Number 98. A directional antenna pointed in the long path direction to another station is generally orientated how many degrees from its short path heading? 180 degrees. Number 99. What are the restrictions on the use of abbreviations or procedural signals in the amateur service? They may be used if the signals do not obscure the meaning of a message. Number 100. What should you do to keep your station from retransmitting music or signals from non-amateur station? Turn down the volume of background audio. Number 101. What identification, if any, is required when two amateur stations begin communications? Each station must transmit its own call sign. Number 102. What is the proper way to interrupt a repeater conversation to signal a distress call? Break in immediately following the transmission of the active party and state your situation and call sign. Hello, this is Chapter 13, Modulation and Transmitters. There are 56 questions in this chapter. Number 1. In a CW transmitter, the blank is between the master oscillator and the power amplifier, the driver buffer. Number 2. In a frequency modulation transmitter, the power amplifier output is connected to the antenna. Number 3. In a single sideband transmitter, the output of the linear amplifier is connected to the antenna. Number 4. In a frequency modulation transmitter, the microphone is connected to the speech amplifier. Number 5. In a single sideband transmitter, the output of the blank is connected to the balanced modulator, speech amplifier. Number 6. In a single sideband transmitter, the output of the variable frequency oscillator is connected to the mixer. Number 7. In a CW transmitter, the blank controls when the RF energy is applied to the antenna. telegraph key. Number 8. In a single sideband transmitter, the output of the blank is connected to the filter, balanced modulator. Number 9. In a CW transmitter, the blank is in between the driver, buffer stage, and the antenna, power amplifier. Number 10. In a single sideband transmitter, the output of the blank is connected to the mixer, variable frequency oscillator. Number 11. In a single sideband transmitter, the blank is connected to the speech amplifier, microphone. Number 12. In a frequency modulation transmitter, the blank is located between the modulator and the frequency multiplier, oscillator. Number 13. In a CW transmitter, the output of the blank is connected to the driver buffer, master oscillator. Number 14. In a typical CW transmitter, the blank is the primary source of the direct current, power supply. Number 15. In a frequency modulation transmitter, the blank is located between the oscillator and the power amplifier, frequency multiplier. Number 16. In a frequency modulation transmitter, the blank is located between the frequency multiplier and the antenna, power amplifier. Number 17. In a frequency modulation transmitter, the input of the speech amplifier is connected to the microphone. Number 18. In a single sideband transmitter, the blank is in between the balanced modulator and the mixer, filter. Number 19. In a frequency modulation transmitter, the blank is in between the speech amplifier and the oscillator, modulator. Number 20. In a single sideband transmitter, the output of the blank is connected to the balanced modulator, radio frequency oscillator. Number 21. In a single sideband transmitter, the blank is in between the mixer and the antenna, linear amplifier. Number 22. In a CW transmitter, the output of the blank is transferred to the antenna, power amplifier. Number 23. Number 23. If you contact another station and your signal is extremely strong and perfectly readable, what adjustment might you make to your transmitter? Turn down your power output to the minimum necessary. Number 24. What type of modulation system changes the amplitude of an RF wave for the purpose of conveying information? Amplitude modulation. Number 25. Which list of emission types is in order from the narrowest bandwidth to the widest bandwidth? CW, RTTY, SSB voice, and FM voice. Number 26. What circuit has variable frequency oscillator and a driver and a power amplifier? A VFO controlled transmitter. Number 27. What happens to the signal of an overmodulated single sideband or double sideband phone transmitter? It becomes distorted and occupies more bandwidth. Number 28. In a typical single sideband phone transmitter, what circuit processes signals from the balanced modulator and sends them to the mixer? Filter. Number 29. The purpose of a balanced modulator in an SSB transmitter is to suppress the carrier and pass on the two sidebands. Number 30. In what emission type does the instantaneous amplitude, or envelope, of the RF signal vary in accordance with the modulating audio? Amplitude modulation. Number 31. What is one advantage of carrier suppression in a double sideband phone transmission? More power can be put into the sidebands for a given power amplifier capacity. Number 32. An RF oscillator should be electrically and mechanically stable. This is to ensure that the oscillator does not drift in frequency. Number 33. What is the term for the average power supplied to an antenna transmission line during one RF cycle at the crest of the modulation envelope? Peak envelope power. Number 34. What is the usual bandwidth of a single sideband amateur signal? Between 2 and 3 kilohertz. Number 35. Morse code is usually transmitted by radio as an interrupted carrier. Number 36. Why isn't frequency modulated or FM phone used below 28.0 megahertz? The bandwidth would exceed limits on the regulations. Number 37. What is the usual bandwidth of a frequency modulated amateur station? Between 10 and 20 kilohertz. Number 38. What may happen if an FM transmitter is operated with the microphone gain or deviation control set too high? It may cause interference to other stations operating near its frequency. Number 39. Why is FM voice best for local VHF or UHF radio communications? It has high fidelity audio which can be understood even when the signal is somewhat weak. Number 40. What emission is produced by a reactance modulator connected to an RF power amplifier? Phase modulation. Number 41. What kind of emission would your FM transmitter produce if its microphone failed to work? An unmodulated carrier. Number 42. A switching system to enable the use of one antenna for a transmitter and receiver should also disable the unit not being used. Number 43. When switching from receive to transmit, the receiver should be muted. Number 44. An antenna changeover switch in a transmitter-receiver combination is necessary so that one antenna can be used for transmitter and receiver. Number 45. A circuit designed to increase the level of its input signal is called an amplifier. Number 46. If an amplifier becomes nonlinear, the output signal would become distorted. Number 47. The range of frequencies to be amplified by speech amplifier is typically 300 to 3,400 Hertz. Number 48. To increase the level of very weak signals from a microphone, you would use an audio amplifier. Number 49. What causes splatter interference? Overmodulation of a transmitter. Number 50. The power of a transmitter is increased from 5 watts to 50 watts by a linear amplifier. The power gain expressed in dB is 10 dB. Number 51. The power of a transmitter is increased from 2 watts to 8 watts. This is a power gain of blank dB. 6 dB. Number 52. You add 9 dB gain amplifier to your 2 watt handheld. What is the power output of the combination? 16 watts. Number 53. The power output from a transmitter increases from 1 watt to 2 watts. This is a dB increase of 3. Number 54. Where in your station can you verify that legal power limits are respected? At the antenna terminals of the transmitter or amplifier. Number 55. With a digital communication mode based on a sound card, what is the result of feeding too much audio into the transceiver? Splatter or out-of-channel emissions. Number 56. Which of the following answers is not correct? Based on the bandwidth required, the following modes may be transmitted on these frequencies. Single sideband or SSB on 10.12 megahertz. Hello, this is chapter 14, Receivers. There is 36 questions in this chapter. Number 1. In a single sideband and CW receiver, the blank is connected to the output of the product detector. Audio frequency amplifier. Number 2. In a frequency modulation receiver, the output of the blank is connected to the mixer. High frequency oscillator. Number 3. In a single sideband and CW receiver, the blank is in between the mixer and the intermediate frequency amplifier. Filter. Number 4. In a frequency modulation receiver, the blank is in between the intermediate frequency amplifier and the frequency discriminator. Limiter. Number 5. In a frequency modulation receiver, the blank connects to the audio frequency amplifier output. Speaker and/or headphones. Number 6. In a frequency modulation receiver, the blank is in between the antenna and the mixer. Radio frequency amplifier. Number 7. In a single sideband and CW receiver, the blank is connected to the output of the audio frequency amplifier. Speaker and/or headphones. Number 8. In a single sideband and CW receiver, the output of the blank is connected to the mixer. High frequency oscillator. Number 9. In a single sideband and CW receiver, the blank output is connected to the audio frequency amplifier. Product detector. Number 10. In a frequency modulation receiver, the blank is located between the limiter and the audio frequency amplifier. Frequency discriminator. Number 11. In a frequency modulation receiver, the blank is located between the filter and the limiter. Intermediate frequency amplifier. Number 12. In a frequency modulation receiver, the blank is in between the mixer and their intermediate frequency amplifier. Filter. Number 13. In a single sideband and CW receiver, the output of the blank is connected to the product detector. Beat frequency oscillator. Number 14. In a single sideband and CW receiver, the antenna is connected to the radio frequency amplifier. Number 15. In a frequency modulation receiver, the output of the high frequency oscillator is fed to the mixer. Number 16. In a single sideband and CW receiver, the output of the blank is connected to the mixer. Radio frequency amplifier. Number 17. In a frequency modulation receiver, the blank is located between the speaker and/or headphones and the frequency discriminator. Audio frequency amplifier. Number 18. In a frequency modulation receiver, the blank is connected to the input of the radio frequency amplifier. Antenna. Number 19. In a single sideband and CW receiver, the blank is connected to the radio frequency amplifier and the high frequency oscillator. Mixer. Number 20. By how many times must the power output of a transmitter be increased to raise the S-meter reading on a nearby receiver from S8 to S9? Approximately 4 times. Number 21. If the power output of a transmitter is increased by 4 times, how might a nearby receiver's S-meter reading change? Increase by approximately 1 S-unit. Number 22. In an SSB transmission, the carrier is reinserted at the receiver. Number 23. The figure in a receiver's specifications which indicates its sensitivity is the signal plus noise to noise ratio. Number 24. Which of the following modes of transmission is usually detected with a product detector? Single sideband suppressed carrier. Number 25. A receiver designed for SSB reception must have BFO or beat frequency oscillator because the suppressed carrier must be replaced for detection. Number 26. A communications receiver has 4 filters installed in it, one at 250 Hz, one at 500 Hz, one at 2.4 kHz and one at 6 kHz. You are copying a CW transmission and there is a great deal of interference. Which one of the filters would you choose? 250 Hz. Number 27. The three main parameters against which the quality of receiver is measured are sensitivity, selectivity, and stability. Number 28. A communications receiver has 4 filters installed in it. One at 250 Hz, one at 500 Hz, one at 2.4 kHz, and one at 6 kHz. If you were listening to single sideband, which filter would you utilize? 2.4 kHz. Number 29. What kind of filter would you use to attenuate an interfering carrier signal while receiving an SSB transmission? A notch filter. Number 30. Selectivity can be placed on the audio stages of a receiver by the utilization of RC active or passive audio filters. If you were to copy CW, which of the following band passes would you choose? 750 to 850 Hz. Number 31. A receiver receives an incoming signal of 3.54 MHz, and the local oscillator produces a signal of 3.995 MHz. To which frequency should the IF be tuned? 455 kHz. Number 32. If two receivers of different sensitivities are compared, the less sensitive receiver will produce less signal or more noise. Number 33. One important application for diodes is recovering information from transmitted signals. This is referred to as demodulation. Number 34. To increase the level of a very weak radio signals from an antenna, you would use an RF amplifier. Number 35. If a signal strength report is 10 dB over S9, what should the report be if the transmitter power is reduced from 1500 watts to 150 watts? S9. Number 36. If a signal strength report is 20 dB over S9, what should the report be if the transmitter power is reduced from 1500 watts to 150 watts? S9 plus 10 dB. Hi there, this is Chapter 15, Radio Frequency Interference. There is 59 questions in this chapter. Number 1. According to NCAB 2, which of the following types of equipment is not included in the list of field strength criteria for resolution of immunity complaints? Broadcast transmitters. Number 2. What does chirp mean? A small change in transmitter's frequency each time it is keyed. Number 3. If a neighbor reports television interference on 1 or 2 channels only when you transmit on 15 meters, what is probably the cause of the interference? Harmonic radiation from your transmitter. Number 4. A bandpass filter will only allow certain frequencies through. Number 5. In order to reduce the harmonic output of a high-frequency or HF transmitter, which of the following filters should be installed at the transmitter? Low pass. Number 6. What should be the impedance of a low-pass filter as compared to the impedance of a transmission line into which it is inserted? About the same. Number 7. What type of filter might be connected to an amateur HF transmitter to cut down on harmonic radiation? A low-pass filter. Number 8. What circuit blocks RF energy above and below a certain limit? A bandpass filter. Number 9. A high-pass filter would normally be fitted at the antenna terminals of the TV receiver. Number 10. Why do modern HF transmitters have built-in low-pass filter in their RF output circuits? To reduce harmonic radiation. Number 11. To reduce energy from an HF transmitter getting into a television set, you would place a blank as close to the TV as possible. High-pass filter. Number 12. A low-pass filter, suitable for high-frequency transmitter, would attenuate frequencies above 30 MHz. Number 13. To reduce harmonic output from a transmitter, you would put a blank in the transmission line as close to the transmitter as possible. A low-pass filter. Number 14. A band reject filter will pass frequencies each side of a band. Number 15. Harmonics may be produced in the RF power amplifier of a transmitter if excessive drive signal is applied to it. Number 16. In a transmitter, excessive harmonics are produced by overdriven stages. Number 17. Why is harmonic radiation from an amateur station not wanted? It may cause interference to other stations and may result in out-of-band signals. Number 18. If you were told your station was heard on 21,375 kHz, but at the time you were operating on 7,125 kHz, what is one reason for this could happen? Your transmitter was radiating harmonic signals. Number 19. Your amateur radio transmitter appears to be creating interference to the television on channel 3, or 60 to 66 MHz, when you are transmitting on the 15-meter band. Other channels are not affected. This is most likely caused is harmonic radiation from the transmitter front end. Number 20. What is meant by harmonic radiation? Unwanted signals at frequencies which are multiples of the fundamental or chosen frequency. Number 21. An interfering signal from a transmitter is found to have frequency of 57 MHz. TV channel is 2 is 54 to 60 MHz. This signal could be second harmonic of a 10-meter transmission. Number 22. One possible cause of TV interference by harmonics by an SSB transmitter is from the flat topping. Driving the final amplifier into nonlinear operation is the most appropriate remedy for this is reduce microphone gain. Number 23. What type of interference may come from a multi-band antenna connected to a poorly tuned transmitter? Harmonic radiation. Number 24. What is meant by receiver overload? Interference caused by strong signals from a nearby transmitter. Number 25. What is one way to tell radio frequency interference to a receiver is caused by front-end overload? If the interference is about the same no matter what frequency is used for the transmitter. Number 26. Cross-modulation is usually caused by rectification of a strong signal. Number 27. How can you minimize the possibility of audio rectification of your transmitter signals? By ensuring that all station equipment is properly grounded. Number 28. How can intermodulation be reduced? By installing a suitable filter at the receiver. Number 29. What devices would you install to reduce or eliminate audio frequency interference to home entertainment systems? Coils on ferrite cores. Number 30. An amateur transmitter is being heard across the entire dial of a broadcast receiver. The receiver is most probably suffering from cross-modulation or audio rectification in the receiver. Number 31. What sound is heard from a public address system if audio rectification of a nearby CB transmission occurs? On and off humming or clicking. Number 32. If a neighbor reports television interference whenever you transmit, no matter what band you use, what is probably the cause of the interference? Receiver overload. Number 33. Intermodulation of a broadcast receiver by a nearby transmitter would be noticed on the receiver as the undesired signal in the background of the desired signal. Number 34. What sound is heard from a public address system if the audio rectification of a nearby single sideband phone transmission occurs? Distorted speech from the transmitter's signals. Number 35. What device can be used to minimize the effect of RF pickup by audio wires connected to stereo speakers, intercom amplifiers, or telephones, etc.? A ferrite core. Number 36. What type of filter should be connected to a TV receiver as the first step in trying to prevent RF overload from an amateur HF station transmission? High pass. Number 37. What should be done if properly operating amateur station is the cause of interference to a nearby telephone? Ask the telephone company to install RFI filters. Number 38. Key clicks heard from a Morse code transmitter are at a distance receiver are the results of two sharp rise and decay times of the carrier. Number 39. In a Morse code transmission, broad bandwidth RF interference or key clicks heard at a distance is produced by poor shaping of the waveform. Number 40. Parasitic oscillations in the RF power amplifier stage of a transmitter may be found at high or low frequencies. Number 41. What should you do if you learn that your transmitter is producing key clicks? Check the keying filter and the functioning of the later stages. Number 42. Stereo amplifiers often have long leads which pick up transmitted signals because they act as receiving antennas. Number 43. What problem may occur if your transmitter is operated without the cover and other shielding in place? It may transmit spurious emissions. Number 44. How can you prevent key clicks? By using a key click filter. Number 45. Stereo speaker leads often act as antennas to pick up RF signals. What is one method you can use to minimize this effect? Shorten the leads. Number 46. A parasitic oscillation is an unwanted signal developed in a transmitter. Number 47. If someone tells you that signals from your handheld transceiver are interfering with other signals on a frequency near yours, what may be the cause? Your handheld may be transmitting spurious emissions. 48. Transmitter RF amplifiers can generate parasitic oscillations on either side of the transmitter frequency. Number 49. If your transmitter sends signals outside the band where it is transmitting, what is this called? Spurious emissions. Number 50. One method of preventing RF from entering a stereo set through the speaker leads is to wrap each of the speaker leads around a ferrite core. Number 51. In Morse code transmission, local RF interference or key clicks is produced by making and breaking of the circuit at the Morse key. Number 52. In the event of the malfunctioning of a neighbor's FM broadcast receiver and stereo system, it will be deemed that the affected equipment's lack of immunity is the cause if the field strength on the premises of the affected equipment is below Industry Canada's specified immunity criteria. Number 53. In the event of interference to a neighbor's television receiver, according to NCAB 2, it will be deemed that a radio amateur's transmission is the cause of the problem in the field strength of the amateur station signal on the neighbor's premises is above Industry Canada specified immunity criteria. Number 54. Which of the following is defined in NCAB 2 as any device, machinery, or equipment other than radio apparatus, the use or functioning of which is or can be adversely affected by radio communication emissions? Radio-sensitive equipment. Number 53. During a club ARRL field day outing, reception is on the 20-meter SSB station is compromised every time the 20-meter CW station is on the air. What might cause this interference? Receiver desensitization. Number 56. You have connected your handheld VHF transceiver to an outside gain antenna. You now hear a mixture of signals together with different modulation on your desired frequency. What is the nature of this modulation? Receiver intermodulation interference. Number 57. Two or more strong out-of-band signals mix in your receiver to produce interference on a desired frequency. What is this called? Intermodulation interference. Number 58. Two mobile stations are traveling along the same road in close proximity to each other and having trouble communicating through a local repeater. Why may be it necessary to use simplex operations to communicate between these cars? The strong signal of one mobile may desensitize the receiver of the other mobile receiver. Number 59. A television receiver suffers interference on channel 6, or 76 to 82 megahertz. When you transmit on 14 megahertz from your home, you will see the tower on a commercial FM station known to broadcast on 92.5 megahertz. Which of these solutions would you try? Insert a high-pass filter at the antenna connector of the television. Hi, this is Chapter 16, Safety. There is 53 questions in this chapter. Number 1. Which statement is not correct? Handheld transmitters are excluded from Safety Code 6 requirements. Number 2. Which statement is correct? Safety Code 6 sets limits for RF exposure for all radio transmitters regardless of power. Number 3. What is the purpose of Safety Code 6? It gives RF exposure limits for the human body. Number 4. Which of the following statements is not correct? Permissible exposure leads to RF fields decreases as frequency is decreased below 10 megahertz. Number 5. What organization has published safety guidelines for the maximum limits of RF energy near the human body? Health Canada. Number 6. According to Safety Code 6, what is the maximum safe power output to the antenna of a handheld VHF or UHF radio? Not specified, the exemption of the portable equipment was withdrawn in 1999. Number 7. The permissible exposure levels of RF fields increases as frequency is increased above 300 megahertz. Number 8. According to Safety Code 6, what frequencies cause us the greatest risk of RF energy? 30 to 300 megahertz. Number 9. Why is the limit of exposure to RF the lowest in the frequency range of 30 megahertz to 300 megahertz according to Safety Code 6? The human body absorbs RF energy the most in this range. Number 10. Power line voltages have been made standard over the years, and the voltages generally supplied to the homes are approximately 120 and 240 volts. Number 11. For the best RF safety, where should the ends and center of a dipole antenna be located? As high as possible to prevent people from coming in contact with the antenna. Number 12. Which of these materials is best for a ground rod driven into the earth? Copper-clad steel. Number 13. Fault finding in a power supply of an amateur transmitter while the supply is operating is not recommended technique because of the risk of electric shock. 14. What is the minimum voltage which is usually dangerous to humans? 30 volts. 15. Before checking a fault in a mains-operated power supply unit, it would be safest to first turn off power and remove the power plug. Number 16. What is the safest method to remove an unconscious person from contact with a high voltage source? Turn off the high voltage switch before removing the person from contact with the source. 17. What should you do if you discover someone who is being burned by high voltage? Turn off the power, call for emergency help, and give CPR if needed. 18. If a separate ground system is not permissible for your amateur station, an alternative indoor grounding point could be a metallic cold water pipe. 19. How little electrical current flowing through a human body can be fatal? As little as 1/10 of an amp. 20. Where should the green wire in a 3-wire AC cord be connected in a power supply? To the chassis. 21. Why would there be a switch in a high voltage power supply to turn off power if its cabinet is opened? To keep anyone opening the cabinet from getting shocked by dangerous high voltages. 22. What is one good way to avoid stray RF energy in your amateur station? Keep the station's ground wire as short as possible. 23. If your third-floor amateur station has a ground wire running 10.05 meters or 33 feet down to the ground rod, why might you get an RF burn if you touch the front panel of your HF transceiver? Because the ground wire is a resident length on several HF bands and acts more like an antenna than an RF ground connection. 24. Which body organ can be fatally affected by a very small amount of electrical current? The heart. 25. To protect you against electrical shock, the chassis of each piece of your station equipment should be connected to a good ground connection. 26. For best protection from electrical shock, what should be grounded in an amateur station? All station equipment. Number 27. What should you do for safety before removing the shielding on a UHF power amplifier? Make sure the amplifier cannot be accidentally turned on. Number 28. Why should you make sure that no one can touch an open wire feed line while you are transmitting with it? Because high voltage radio energy might burn the person. Number 29. What safety precautions should you take before beginning repairs on an antenna? Be sure to turn off the transmitter and disconnect the feed line. Number 30. Why should you ground all antenna and rotator cables when your amateur station is not in use? To protect the station and building from lightning damage. 31. Why should you wear a hard hat if you are on the ground helping someone with an antenna tower? To protect your head from something dropped from the tower. 32. Why should your outside antennas be high enough so that no one can touch them while you are transmitting? Touching the antennas may cause RF burns. Number 33. On mains power supply, the ground wire should be connected to the metal chassis of the power supply. This ensures, in case there is a fault in the power supply, that the chassis does not develop a high voltage with respect to the ground. Number 34. What equipment should be worn for working on an antenna tower? Approved equipment in accordance with provincial safety standards concerning climbing. 35. What should you do for safety when operating at UHF and microwave frequencies? Keep antenna away from your eyes when RF is applied. Number 36. For safety, how high should you place a horizontal wire antenna? High enough so that no one can touch any part of it from the ground. 37. Which statement about station grounding is true? RF hotspots can occur in a station located above the ground floor if the equipment is grounded by a long ground wire. Number 38. The purpose of using a 3-wire power cord and plug on an amateur radio equipment is to prevent the chassis from becoming live in case of an internal short to the chassis. 39. What should you do for safety if you put up a UHF transmitting antenna? Make sure the antenna will be in a place where no one can get near it when you are transmitting. 40. How can an amateur station equipment best be protected from lightning damage? Disconnect all equipment from power lines and antenna cables. 41. What precautions should you take when installing a ground-mounted antenna? It should be installed so no one can come in contact with it. Number 42. Why should you wear a safety belt if you are working on an antenna tower? To prevent you from accidentally falling. 43. Which body organ is the most likely to be damaged from the heating effects of RF radiation? Your eyes. 44. How can exposure to a large amount of RF energy affect body tissue? It heats the tissue. Number 45. How should you position the antenna of a handheld transceiver while you are transmitting? Away from your head and away from others. Number 46. Depending on the wavelength of the signal, the energy density of the RF field, and other factors, in what way can RF energy affect body tissue? It heats the tissue. 47. Why should you make sure the antenna of a handheld transceiver is not close to your head when transmitting? To reduce your exposure to the radio frequency energy. 48. Why should directional high-gain antennas be mounted higher than nearby structures? So they will not direct RF energy towards people in nearby structures. 49. If you operate your amateur station with indoor antennas, what precautions should you take when you install them? Locate the antennas as far away as possible from living spaces that will be occupied while you are operating. 50. Which of these statements about Safety Code 6 is false? Safety Code 6 sets limits of power levels fed into antennas. 51. Wire fuses needed as close as possible to the vehicle battery when wiring the transceiver directly to the battery. To prevent an overcurrent from starting a fire. 52. If you ground your station equipment to a ground rod driven into the earth, what is the shortest length of rod it should be? Station ground system must conform to applicable electrical code requirements. Number 53. If you want to install a lightning arrestor on your antenna transmission line, where should it be inserted? Outside, as close to the earth grounding as possible. Hi there, this is Chapter 17, Regulations. There is 120 questions in this chapter. Number 1. Which of the following statements is not correct? A person may decode an encrypted subscription programming signal and transmit it to the public. Number 2. Which of the following is not correct? The minister may suspend a radio authorization with no notice or opportunity to make representation thereto. Number 3. Which of the following statements is not correct? A radio inspector may enter a dwelling without the consent of the occupant and without a warrant. Number 4. The minister may suspend or revoke a radio authorization without notice where the holder has failed to comply with the request to pay fees or interest due. Number 5. The fee for an operator certificate is free. Number 6. The amateur radio operator certificate should be retained at the address notified to Industry Canada. 7. Out of amateur band transmissions, our prohibited penalties could be assessed to the control operator. 8. If an amateur pretends that there is an emergency and transmit the word Mayday, what is this called? False or deceptive signals. 9. A person found guilty of transmitting a false distress signal or interfering with or obstructing any radio communication without lawful cause may be liable on summary conviction to a penalty of a fine not exceeding $5,000, or a prison term of 1 year, or both. 10. Which of the following is not an exception from the penalties under the Act for divulging, intercepting, or using information obtained through radio communications other than broadcasting? Where it is to provide information for a journalist. 11. Radio communications transmitted by stations other than a broadcasting station may be divulged or used if it's transmitted by an amateur station. 12. The holder of an amateur radio operator certificate with basic qualifications is limited to a maximum of watts when exposed as direct current input power to the anode or collector circuit of the transmitter stage supplying radio frequency energy to the antenna. 250. 13. What kind of payment is allowed for third-party messages sent by an amateur station? No payment of any kind is allowed. 14. The operator of an amateur station shall not demand or accept remuneration in any form in respect of a radio communication that the person transmits or receives. 15. What amount of transmitter power must radio amateurs use at all times? The minimum legal power necessary to communicate. 16. The licensee of an amateur station may operate radio-controlled models on all frequencies above 30 MHz. 17. The DC power input to the anode or collector circuit of the final RF stage of a transmitter, used by a holder of an amateur radio operator certificate with advanced qualifications, shall not exceed 1,000 watts. 18. The call sign of a Canadian amateur radio station would normally start with the letters VA, VE, VO, or VY. 19. If you let another amateur with additional qualifications than yours control your station, what operating privileges are allowed? Only the privileges allowed by your qualifications. 20. A person operating a Canadian amateur station is forbidden to communicate with amateur stations of another country when that country has notified the International Telecommunications Union that it objects to such communications. 21. One of the following is not considered to be communications on behalf of a third party, even though the message is originated by or addressed to a non-amateur. Messages originated from Canadian Forces Affiliated Radio Services, or CFARS. 22. What is the maximum transmitting output power an amateur station may use on 3,750 kHz if the operator has basic and 5 words per minute qualifications? 560 watts PEP output for SSB operation. 23. The maximum DC input to the final stage of an amateur transmitter when the operator is the holder of both the basic and advanced qualifications is 1,000 watts. 24. How often must an amateur station be identified? At least every 30 minutes and at the beginning and at the end of a contact. 25. Amateur third-party communications is the transmission of non-commercial or personal messages to or on behalf of a third party. 26. What is the maximum authorized bandwidth within the frequency range of 50 to 148 MHz? 30 kHz. 27. Only one band of amateur frequencies has a maximum allowed bandwidth of less than 6 kHz. That band is 10.1 to 10.15 MHz. 28. International communications on behalf of third parties may be transmitted by an amateur station only if the countries concerned have authorized such communications. 29. What is the most FM transmitter power a holder of only basic qualifications may use on 147 MHz? 250 watt DC input. 30. If you are the control operator at a station of another amateur who has additional qualifications to yours, what operating privileges are you allowed? Only the privileges allowed by your qualifications. 31. The bandwidth of an amateur station shall be determined by measuring the frequency band occupied by that signal at the level of blank dB below the maximum amplitude of that signal. 26. 32. One of the following is not considered to be communications on behalf of a third party, even though the message may be originated by or addressed to a non-amateur. Messages that originate from the United States Military Affiliated Radio System, or MARS. 33. Which of the following statements is not correct? A Canadian radio amateur may pass third-party traffic with all duly licensed amateur stations in any country which is a member of the ITU. 34. The operator of an amateur station who is the holder of a basic qualifications shall ensure that the station power, when expressed as RF output power measured across an impedance-matched load, does not exceed 560 watts peak envelope power for the transmitters producing any type of single sideband emission. 35. Except for one band, the maximal bandwidth of an amateur station's transmission allowed below 28 MHz is 6 kHz. 36. In Canada, radio amateurs may use which of the following for radio control of models? All amateur frequency bands above 30 MHz. 37. When may an amateur transmit unidentified communications? Never, except to control a model craft. 38. What language may you use when identifying your station? English or French. 39. Radio amateurs may use their stations to transmit international communications on behalf of a third party only if such communications have been authorized by the countries concerned. 40. Single sideband is not permitted in the band 10.1 to 10.15 MHz. 41. What is the maximum transmitting power an amateur station may use for SSB operation on 7055 kHz of the operator has basic and 12 words per minute qualifications? 560 watts PEP output. 42. Which of the following call signs is a valid Canadian amateur radio call sign? VA3XYZ. 43. In addition to passing the basic written examination, what must you do before you are allowed to use amateur frequencies below 30 MHz? You must pass a Morse code or advanced test or attain a mark of 80% on the basic exam. 44. What identification, if any, is required when two amateur stations end their communications? Each station must transmit its own call sign. 45. If a non-amateur friend is using your station to talk to somebody in Canada and a foreign station breaks in to talk to your friend, what should you do? Have your friend wait until you find out if Canada has a third-party agreement with the foreign station's government. 46. The maximum bandwidth of an amateur station's transmission allowed in the band 144 to 148 MHz is 30 kHz. 47. What do you transmit to identify your amateur station? Your call sign. 48. The maximum bandwidth of an amateur station's transmission allowed in the band 28 to 29.7 MHz is 20 kHz. 49. Maximum bandwidth of an amateur station's transmission allowed in the band 50 to 54 MHz is 30 kHz. 50. If you let an unqualified third party use your amateur station, what must you do at your station's control point? You must continuously monitor and supervise the third party's participation. 51. The department that is responsible for the administration of the Telecommunications Act is Industry Canada. 52. Authority to make radio communication regulations is derived from the Radio Communication Act. 53. The amateur radio service is defined in the Radio Communications Regulations. 54. Authority to make standards for the operation of radio stations in the amateur radio service is derived from the Radio Communication Act. 55. When operating on frequencies below 148 MHz, the frequency stability must be comparable to the crystal control. 56. All amateur stations, regardless of the mode of transmission used, must be equipped with a reliable means of determining the operating radio frequency. 57. Canada is located in ITU Region 2. 58. Australia, Japan, and Southeast Asia are in which ITU region? 3. 59. The maximum percentage of modulation permitted in the use of radio telephony by an amateur station is 100%. 60. What type of messages may be transmitted to an amateur station in a foreign country? Messages of a technical nature or personal remarks of relative unimportance. 61. Which of the following is not a provision of the ITU radio regulations which applies to Canadian radio amateurs? Transmissions between countries shall not include any messages of technical nature or remarks of a personal character. 62. The fee for taking amateur radio certificate examinations at an Industry Canada office is $20 per qualification. 63. A Canadian radio amateur operating his station in the state of Florida is subject to which frequency band limits? Those applicable to U.S. radio amateurs. 64. The operator of an amateur station shall ensure that communications are limited to messages of a technical or personal nature. 65. The ITU radio regulations limit those radio amateurs who have not demonstrated proficiency in Morse code to frequencies above none of the above. 66. Radio telephone signals in a frequency band below blank megahertz cannot be automatically retransmitted unless these signals are received from a station operated by a person qualified to transmit on frequencies below the above frequency. 29.5 megahertz. 67. Which of the following statements is not correct? A disabled candidate must pass a normal amateur radio certificate examination before being granted any qualification. 68. The maximum percentage of modulation permitted in the use of radio telephony by an amateur station is 100%. 69. An unmodulated carrier may be transmitted only for brief tests on frequencies below 30 MHz. 70. A Canadian radio amateur operating his station 7 kilometers or 4 miles offshore from the coast of Florida is subject to which frequency band limits? Those applicable to U.S. radio amateurs. 71. An amateur station using radio telephony must install a device for indicating or preventing overmodulation. 72. In addition to complying with the Act and radio communication regulations, Canadian radio amateurs must also comply with the regulations of the International Telecommunication Union. 73. A reliable means to prevent or indicate overmodulation must be employed at an amateur station if radio telephony is used. 74. The fee for taking examinations for amateur radio operator certificates by an accredited volunteer examiner is to be negotiated between examiner and candidate. 75. Which of the following statements is not correct? Radio telephone signals may be transmitted in the 21 MHz band when received in a VHF band from a station operated by a person with only basic qualifications. 76. Which of these statements about erection of an antenna structure is not correct? A radio amateur may erect any size antenna structure without consulting neighbors or the local land use authority. 77. In which international telecommunication region is Canada? 2. 78. Which of these statements is not correct? The fee for taking an examination for an amateur radio operator certificate at an Industry Canada office is $5 per qualification. 79. Where a friend is not the holder of any type of radio operator certificate, you, as the holder of an amateur radio operator certificate with basic qualifications, may, on behalf of your friend, not install, place in operation, modify, repair, maintain, or permit the operation of the radio apparatus. 80. What must you do to notify your mailing address changes? Contact Industry Canada and provide details of your address change. 81. Whenever a change of address is made, Industry Canada must be advised of any change in postal address. 82. What age must you be to hold an amateur radio operator certificate with basic qualifications? There are no age limits. 83. Which examinations must be passed before an amateur radio operator certificate is issued? Basic. The holder of an amateur radio operator certificate may build transmitting equipment for the use in the amateur radio service, provided that the person has the advanced qualifications. 85. Which of the following cannot be discussed on an amateur net? Business planning. 86. When is an radio amateur allowed to broadcast information to the general public? Never. 87. When may false or deceptive amateur signals or communications be transmitted? Never. 88. Which of the following one-way communications may not be transmitted in the amateur service? Broadcasts intended for the general public. 89. Transmissions of a secret code by the operator of an amateur station is not permitted. 90. A radio amateur may be engaged in communications that include the transmissions of Q signals. 91. Which type of station may transmit one-way communications? Beacon station. 92. In order to install any radio apparatus to be used specifically for receiving and automatically retransmitting radio telephone communications within the same frequency band, a radio amateur must hold an amateur radio operator certificate with a minimum of the qualifications basic and advanced. 94. In order to install any radio apparatus to be used specifically for a club station, the radio operator must hold an amateur radio operator certificate with the minimum of the following qualifications: basic and advanced. 95. In order to install or operate a transmitter or RF amplifier that is not commercially manufactured for use in the amateur service, a radio amateur must hold an amateur operator certificate with the minimum of which certificate qualifications: basic and advanced. 96. Who is responsible for the proper operation of an amateur station? Both the control operator and the station licensee. 97. The owner of an amateur station may permit any person to operate the station under supervision and in the presence of the holder of the amateur operator certificate. 98. The holder of an amateur radio certificate with the basic qualification is authorized to operate the following stations: a station authorized in the amateur service. 99. Holders of which of the following certificates may be issued an amateur radio operator certificate? Radio Canadian Radio Communication Operator General Certificate Maritime, or RGMC. 100. An amateur station may be used to communicate with stations operated under similar authorizations. 101. Which of the following is not correct? A radio amateur may not operate or permit to be operated a radio apparatus which he knows is not performing to the radio communications regulations. 102. Which of the following is not correct? An amateur radio operator transmitting unnecessary or offensive signals does not violate accepted practice. 103. Some VHF and UHF radios purchased for use in the amateur service can also be programmed to communicate on frequencies used for land mobile service. Under what conditions is this permissible? The radio is certified under proper radio standard specification for use in Canada and is licensed by Industry Canada on the specific frequencies. 104. You wish to develop and use a new digital encoding technique to transmit data over amateur spectrum. Under what conditions is this permissible? When the encoding technique is published in the public domain. 105. When may an amateur station in a two-way communication transmit a message in a secret code in order to obscure the meaning of the communication? Only when the encoding or cipher is not secret. 106. In the amateur radio service, business communications are not permitted under any circumstances. 107. The amateur radio service is authorized to share a portion of what industrial, scientific, medical, ISM band that is heavily used by license-exempt devices. 2,300 to 2,450 MHz. 108. International third-party amateur radio communications in case of emergency or disaster relief is expressly permitted unless specifically prohibited by the foreign administration concerned. 109. One of the following is not considered to be communications on behalf of a third party, even though the message is originated by or addressed to a non-amateur. Messages that originate from the U.S. Military Auxiliary Radio System, MARS. 110. Which of the following is the most powerful equipment of the holder of a Basic with Honor certificate can legally operate at full power? 160 watts carrier power VHF amplifier. 111. Which of the following statements is false? A candidate with insufficient knowledge of English or French may be accompanied by an interpreter. 112. Who has authority over antenna installations including masts and towers? The Ministry of Industry, or IC. 113. If you are planning to install or modify an antenna system, under what conditions may you not be required to contact land use authorities to determine public consultation requirements? When an exclusion criteria defined by Industry Canada applies. 114. The Land Use Authority has not established a process for public consultation for antenna systems. The radio amateur planning to install or modify an amateur antenna system must fulfill the public consultation requirements set out in Canada's default public consultation process unless the Land Use Authority excludes their type of proposal from consultation or is excluded by Industry Canada's process. 115. Which is not an element of the Industry Canada public consultation process for antenna systems? Participating in public meetings on the project. 116. The default public consultation process for antenna systems requires proponents to address reasonable and relevant concerns provided in writing within the 30-day public commitment period. 117. Where a municipality has developed a public consultation process which the following options best describes all circumstances when public consultation is not required. Exclusions listed in either CPC-2-0-03 or the Local Land Use Authority. 118. Where the proponent and stakeholder other than the general public will reach an impasse over a proposed antenna system, the final decision will be made by Industry Canada. 119. In general, what is the tallest amateur antenna system excluded from the requirements to consult with the Land Use Authority and public where there is a Land Use Authority defined public consultation process? The taller of the height exclusion of the Land Use Authority public consultation process in Industry Canada's antenna sitting procedures. 120. Where a land use authority or municipality has established a public consultation process for antenna systems, who determines how the public consultation process should take place? The land use authority or municipality.